Go Vice Chairperson Rodriguez Ceja.
Here.
Commissioner Franz.
Present.
Commissioner Fajardo.
Present.
And Commissioner Jackie Lopez absent.
Okay. Commissioner Fajardo, would you be so kind as to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance?
Good. Right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I know we do have some public comments for items on the agenda. Do we have any public comments today for items not on the agenda, Jessica?
There are none.
No public comments on items not on the agenda. Okay. Before we get into minutes, we'll take a brief moment to introduce our new Assistant City Attorney, please.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, I'd like to introduce Lauren Sanchez with Cole Huber. Last week, our City Council appointed Cole Huber as our new legal firm. Our City Attorney's name is Stephen Graham, and Lauren is the Assistant City Attorney, works closely with Mr. Graham, and I'm going to give the mic over to her so she can make an introduction of herself.
Cole Huber is very excited about joining the Indio team, and I'm looking forward to working with the Planning Commission going forward.
Well, thank you very much. And then item 4, we have minutes for Planning Commission meeting of August 11th, 2022. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
A motion is second. Okay, can we take a roll call vote, please?
Chairperson Isiano.
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Ceja.
Yes.
Commissioner Franz.
Yes.
Commissioner Fajardo.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. And then moving on to public hearing items, we'll open the public hearing. And first item is 5.1, resolution number 2033, recommending the City Council the making of the finding of consistency with the program final environmental impact report for General Plan 2040. Staff.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Kevin Snyder, Director of Community Development. This evening, we're going to go through a series of public hearings relating to the Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan. This particular item relates to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. And as the Commission may remember from your last study session, the City of Indio adopted its General Plan 2040 on September 18th, 2019. As part of that effort, the city conducted a comprehensive environmental impact report that evaluated different alternatives around the adoption of that general plan and evaluated them in detail. Issues that were evaluated included traffic, air, noise, quality, land use, and other issue areas. City Council on September 18th, 2019 also certified that final environmental impact report. What that has done is set the stage for where we're at this evening. So as we discussed at the previous study session, the Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan is intended to implement the vision, goals, and policies of the adopted General Plan 2040. State law requires that a specific plan be consistent with the general plan. In that vein, because a comprehensive environmental evaluation was done for the general plan, and because the specific plan as presented to you this evening is intended and is consistent with the general plan, state law, particularly under CEQA, allows cities to make a determination of what's called a finding of consistency. And in essence, what that means is that the proposal in front of you, the Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan, is consistent with the environmental documentation that was done for the General Plan 2040. Therefore, if it is consistent, no additional environmental documentation is necessary per state law. So the resolution in front of you, resolution number 2033, proposes that the Planning Commission make a recommendation to the City Council to make a finding of consistency with the General Plan 2040. Attached as an exhibit to that is a detailed analysis prepared by Rincon Consultants, which is a sub-consultant for the consultant team for this project, in which they confirm the consistency and create the public record of consistency. So in terms of where we're at today, this is the first step. You'll have other public hearing items following this, but the staff recommendation is that you do adopt resolution number 2033 to recommend to the city council that they make a finding of consistency with the general plan 2040 EIR or environmental impact report that was certified on September 18th, 2019. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the commission might have before you open your public hearing.
Any questions for staff? No? Vice Chair?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Okay, then no questions at this moment. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing and then invite any public comments on this item on the agenda. Do we have any comments on 5.1?
There are none.
Okay,
So at this time, Chair, if the commission wishes, you can close the public hearing and proceed to deliberations.
okay. We'll close the public hearing, seeing that there are no comments. Commissioners? Someone saying something?
No, this is pretty, I guess pretty normal for us. And we've been going through so many plans and so many revisions that we kind of feel comfortable with this process at this time. So I don't have any comments. I went through, I looked at it. I did love the fact that we're hoping to get 500 new homes in along this corridor, which I think is very important to our overall housing plan. But other than that, I don't really have any questions. If there are no other questions, I'd be more than happy to make a motion.
Certainly.
Okay. All right. I'd like to make a motion for us to recommend, let me make sure I get this right, recommending to the City Council the making of a finding of consistency with the program Final Environmental Impact Report, FEIR, for the General Plan 2040 certified by the City Council on September 18th, 2019 for the adoption of the Highway 111 Corridor Specific Plan, which is resolution number 2033.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, Commissioner Vice Chair Ceja. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairperson Isiano,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Rodriguez Ceja,
Yes.
Commissioner Franz,
Yes.
Commissioner Fajardo,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, wonderful. Moving on to public hearing item 5.2, resolution number 2034, recommending City Council the adoption of Highway 111 Corridor Specific Plan and the repeal of the Central Highway 111 Corridor Specific Plan and Mixed Use Specific Plan 300. We have staff report on that also, Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, for the record, Kevin Snyder, Director of Community Development. So now we get to the fun stuff. So at your last study session, myself, along with representatives of the consultant team, presented a working draft version of the plan to you. And I want to note that representatives of the consultant team are available this evening to assist in any questions and conversation that you might have. But I want to back up for a second. So in 2021, the city applied for and received what's called an SB2 planning grant. And this was a grant that was available to the city, non-competitive, in the amount of $310,000. We applied for that grant, we received that grant. And that purpose of that grant was to prepare a specific plan for the Highway 11 corridor. And as noted by Commissioner Franz earlier, there were several goals around that plan. One is the state asked us to plan for a minimum of 500 new housing units, not specified what type of housing units, not affordable, not market, not mixed income, but just housing units, which we gladly did because we knew there was capacity in the corridor to accommodate that and much more. We also wanted to focus on developing a sustainable employment base in the corridor that would provide the opportunity in the future for family wage jobs. And then finally, we wanted to plan for an enhancement of the public infrastructure along the corridor. As you may remember, the corridor is approximately 3.9 miles long from Jefferson Street to Indio Boulevard. And in that corridor, the planning area is approximately a quarter mile on either side of the public right-of-way of Highway 111. So it's a big area and a lot going on in that area. And so as we got into the planning effort, it became acutely aware that it wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach for this plan. So as we developed the plan and as we brought it to you recently, this plan is somewhat of a dynamic plan. It looks at the corridor in sub areas. It identifies centers. It identifies market realities, and I'll get to that in just a minute. And finally, the plan also recognizes that this is not going to happen overnight. Likely the planning horizon for this is beyond 20 years, because in many ways, the corridor's land use patterns have been set. It's going to take market forces to modify them. We do have some large swaths of vacant land that are opportunity sites for implementation of the plan, but we have other areas of the corridor that have been developed along a traditional suburban auto-oriented model. The plan envisions a different model for Highway 111, and it's again based on the general plan. The general plan envisions a connected corridor, not only to the public rights of way, but between properties. It envisions a multimodal corridor, or a corridor that is not dominated by automobiles only, that provides opportunities for pedestrians, bicyclists, and other forms of travel that are emerging, such as scooters, for example. And then finally, the plan also realizes a vision of the general plan that this become a distinctive portion of the community. I don't think it's a stretch to say that when you drive down Highway 111, there is no sense of place. The goal is to create a sense of place. In the plan, there's a term used that the goal of the plan is to take the rip and turn it back into a zipper. And what it's meant by that is right now, the way that the corridor has built out over the last 50, 60 years is it's become a rip. You have a thoroughfare that in many ways acts more like a freeway than a main street. And you have land uses on either side of that. They're not connected. So the goal of the plan is to reconnect. And that is one of the main hopes of the plan. But we recognize that no planning effort happens overnight. And there are market forces that will come to play over time. So in recognition of that, the plan also provides a way for properties to continue to be utilized for productive purpose, to continue to provide services that may be of value or interest to the city. We've talked about that with you last time. The term that we use is limited land uses. The goal of this is not to inhibit or stop what we call limited land uses. Examples might be drive-through restaurants, car washes, convenience markets, fuel stations, from not occurring on the corridor, but to limit their frequency of occurrence on the corridor, and hopefully to allow the corridor over time to mature to the vision of the general plan, which is a more dense, more urban form corridor. And you saw some examples of that when we did the study session, and you see those examples in the specific plan. So the specific plan before you, bluntly, is very bold. It does envision a different future for Highway 111. It is going to make people uncomfortable, guaranteed. I've already been talking to some of those people. You've gotten some correspondence this evening. People are a little bit nervous. People have projects that they want to do along that corridor. But the plan is also flexible. The plan is not a one-size-fits-all. We do have built into the plan the ability to work on a case-by-case basis to create reasonable projects that meet and satisfy the goals of the specific plan, which are the goals of the general plan. What that means, though, is there will be some things that will be expected in return if the specific plan is ultimately adopted. Higher quality to design. That's something that this planning commission has spent a lot of energy talking about. You spend a lot of time looking at that with the zoning regulations update project that you've been working on, and that's going to city council, or has gone to city council, excuse me. So higher quality design is going to be an expectation. Connectability is going to be an expectation. This planning commission worked with the city council and the community in the general plan update to tackle a major frustration in this community, which is difficulty getting around, not only between different streets, but from property to property, where you have to literally sometimes get in your car to go from one property to the other. And the goal of the general plan, as envisioned by the planning commission, members of the community, and the city council, was to connect the community. And that's what the specific plan tries to do. Make some folks uncomfortable because suddenly you're going to have the public in your private space. We understand that, and we're going to work with folks if the plan gets adopted to make sure that that's a balanced approach. But it is a reasonable approach based on the general plan that has been adopted for this city. You will probably hear folks tell you that this is not market realistic. They may be right, at least right now. But no change starts without change. And the plan is a change. It's not out of bounds. It's not unrealistic, but it is definitely going to challenge existing assumptions. And it is going to make all of our jobs a little bit harder because we're going to have to do a little bit more work than we've done in the past in this particular area of the city. Just like you as a commission and us, myself as staff and my team are going to have to do a little bit more work when the new zoning regulations get adopted, if they do get adopted in September, because we're asking property owners, businesses, developers to step up their game a little bit, because that is what the general plan told us we needed to do. So standing in front of you this evening is the Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan. It is intended to replace two existing specific plans. The Mixed Use Specific Plan 300, which runs approximately from Jefferson Street to Clinton on both sides of Highway 111, and the Central Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan, which really kind of centers around the area that we often refer to as Midtown. It's the area where you'll find the Indio Marketplace and some other areas. It's bounded on the south by John Noble's, on the north by the Rubidoux, on Highway 111 and Rubidoux, and Monroe, and goes out to Las Palmas. So it's kind of it's hard to describe, but it's that area of the city that kind of acts as the center of Highway 111, for lack of a better word. So those two plans, if the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council and the City Council accepts it, those plans will disappear. The MUSP 300 has been in effect since 1997. I can tell you in almost 4 years here, it is a very difficult plan to implement, and it's not consistent with the current general plan. The Central Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan was adopted in 2005, also a very difficult plan to implement, and also not consistent with the General Plan 2040. So your actions this evening, if you decide to take actions, would begin the process of unraveling those existing plans, replacing them with the new Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan, and helping yourselves as Planning Commission members, the City Council, the community, and us as city staff move forward in realizing the vision of the General Plan 2040, which honestly, from my perspective and doing this almost 30 years, is one of the most forward-looking general plans I've ever worked around. And this city has a lot to be proud of, but it does require some heavy lifting. And that's partly what this plan is asking you to do this evening, is to engage in the heavy lifting of implementing the General Plan 2040. So with that, staff is recommending that you consider adopting resolution number 2034, recommending to the City Council the adoption of the Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan and the repeal of the Mixed Use Specific Plan 300 and the Central Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the commission might have before you open your public hearing.
I have a quick question regarding those two specific plans. You're saying that they do not fall in line very well with our general plan 2040. How did they line up with the previous general plan?
That's a great question, Chair. I would say, okay, to be honest. I think the General Plan 2020 had some shortcomings. The MUSP 300, for its time, when it was done in 1997, was actually fairly forward-looking, but it had no flexibility. It was a very restrictive plan, and it didn't allow. It was a one-size-fits-all plan. And the reality is that in a mile-plus corridor that it covered, it really became difficult for implementing that plan, which is why you have seen those large swaths of land that you see along Highway 11. That's why they're still that way, because it does not fit market realities. It does not provide flexibility. And so you as a commission, when you consider projects, your proverbial hands are tied very tightly. The reality is that planning is not one size fits all. There are situations, site situations, market situations that don't always correspond to one size fits all. The Central Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan does a little bit better job. But the challenge with that project is it didn't envision the density and the intensity of land use that the General Plan 2040 is. So it came up short in that regard. And it wasn't malleable enough to be able to be brought forward into the General Plan 2040 environment that we're working in.
Thank you. Do we have any other commissioner questions for staff?
Kevin, I'm actually, sure,
Oh,
if I may.
go ahead, sir.
Kevin, it would be good to understand, and for the public record, really, when we're talking about those shortcomings, how does this new specific plan try to address those shortcomings, and how does it integrate more of a human scale? Because I think part of the concern in some of the comments that we're receiving is some of the limitations that we're doing that are actually going to make it more accessible to the community. So I'm just curious if you could please just explain to us how this new plan is attempting to address some of the shortcomings that were of priority to the community, like connectivity and such.
Yeah, that's a great question, Vice Chair. So a main premise of the Highway 11 Corridor Specific Plan is a more built urban environment. And what that means is that when we are designing sites, we are paying particular attention to how the site is designed, how it relates to the properties around it, how it relates to the public right-of-way. We're paying more attention to how the buildings are designed. How are they oriented? How do people access them? It's not only by vehicular connection. The plan recognizes that people are still going to drive cars. It's not saying people are not going to drive cars, but what it's saying is that there should be other ways to get there. The plan also recognizes a major tenet of the General Plan 2040, which I mentioned a little bit ago, is connectivity. So many planning documents really focus on the connection between a property and the public right-of-way, and that's an appropriate lens to look through. This plan goes a little bit further because the General Plan 2040 says it should look at the connectability between properties. So typically when a commission, like the Planning Commission, is looking at an entitlement application, you're typically just looking at that particular site. Under the lens we have looked at since I've been here, our rules have not really allowed us to look beyond that site. I know that this Planning Commission has asked those questions. How does this connect to the properties or the community around it? So the plan addresses that. It looks for and seeks and requests and requires that there be connectability between properties. Now, there is a map in the plan that the consultants and I developed together that shows how connectability could occur. Is that the only way it can occur? No, that's the flexibility part. The goal is connectability. We've shown how we believe it could occur in a way that balances the land use interests of private property owners with the need for and desire for connectability. But that is obviously flexible and would be looked at on a case-by-case basis. But what the plan would not allow us to do, both as Planning Commission members and as staff, is to ignore connections. And our rules and regulations up till now have not been in alignment with that. The General Plan 2040 says we should look at connectability. And the recent zoning regulations that you reviewed has connectability as a component. The General Plan 2040 has connectability as a component. Am I answering your question, or should if you want me to go further into detail, please let me know.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
I appreciate that, Mr. Snyder. Appreciate staff's work on this, and certainly as a longtime resident of the city of Indio, going back to the times of when the city of Indio was considered the hub of the valley, and I appreciate the analogy with the zipper and how that interconnectedness, I think, helps, particularly with the families and some of the respondents to the survey in terms of taking the time to read through some of those comments, also noting some of the constituents that I may have reached out to. The plan does just provide that flexibility, removes the rigidity, which is, I think, appreciated by a lot of the residents in our community, but more importantly, allows for that flexibility to build out these areas that otherwise I think would be, correct me if I'm wrong, but would be hindered by the flexibility that this new plan does offer. So I appreciate the fact that it is segmented, between the east, the mid, and the west. And forgive me if those aren't the proper terms, but I do want to bring up the public realm, opportunity in terms of what that constitutes for safer streets, the safety of our residents, particularly those who may obviously be utilizing the scooters, as you mentioned, and more importantly, folks that may be, walking the neighborhood, at whatever hours of the day. And I realize that in the plan, it does outline, some of those elements, but if you can kind of speak to that sort of infrastructure and what kind of safety, that we have in place. And of course, the traffic and mobility that involves, I think, just those safe connected areas, I think is probably somewhat of a concern for some, but not for all. I just wanted to make sure that we tease that out.
No, thank you, Commissioner. That's a great question. So the public space, for quite a while, cities have been focused on getting traffic through their communities, and that's not an improper focus. It's an important. We live with vehicles, whether they be combustion vehicles or electric vehicles. We live with them, and they are part of our lifestyles. So if you look at Highway 111, it's a very traditional looking suburban east-west corridor. It focuses on movement of vehicles. It secondarily focuses on movement of pedestrians and or bicyclists or other forms of travel. The plan envisions a different public space. The plan looks at the public space as a shared space. The plan looks at that pedestrians, bicyclists, and other modes of travel should be given higher consideration. What could that mean? Well, the plan outlines some concepts for that, just like it did in the downtown specific plan when this commission reviewed that and made its recommendation to City Council. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it's going to get built, but it gives us a concept and a guide as to how we could look at that. So, for example, perhaps the city might someday seek to narrow down parts of Highway 111. It's typically called a road diet. That's a term that's used quite frequently. And what that means is that maybe there will be less lanes of travel. Maybe a lane of travel will be given over to bicyclists. And I say maybe because these decisions are ultimately made by the City Council, sometimes and often with the input of the Planning Commission and other advisory bodies. So the idea is to, as I said earlier in my presentation, the idea is to remake over time, and certainly you can't remake 3.9 miles of corridor at once. That's financially not probably feasible, but over time, remake it so it does, and I use the term loosely, but it's appropriate term, have a more of a Main Street feel. And this is not a new concept. Every city in the valley is having this conversation. Our friends in La Quinta are having this conversation. They're doing their own planning effort for Highway 11. Our friends in Rancho Mirage are having this conversation. Our friends in Palm Springs have already, don't even call it Highway 11 anymore, and they've made efforts to make it much less of a thoroughfare. So what we're really talking about is taking back the public space for everyone, not just for vehicles.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I know we do have 2 public comments. First, we have Tiffany Herrera. If you'd like to speak, please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Herrera. My thoughts as far as Corridor 111 is very similar to what Kevin Snyder is talking about. More on expanding the width of bike lanes, along with considering a bus rapid transit system that is a lane dedicated solely to the bus, as we financially are not able to consider a light rail system right now. But a bus rapid transit BRT is more accessible to us, where we can just take a lane of traffic and dedicate it solely to the bus. That way our time for traffic is for the bus is always on time. It does not get behind on because of traffic, because of construction. It'll just be dedicated to that solely. And it would be better for everyone as far as for transportation equality. I mean, because it's not just about the cars, because is basically kind of a status symbol for a lot of people, whether we believe it or not. And it would be great for everyone to have that accessibility between those with low income, along with those who are, I say, underage. So you think 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, they're able to ride a bicycle. They have the right to be able to go to the store and purchase items. They're also shoppers too. They are part of our community. I think that's all I really have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Director Snyder, just quick question in reference to that. Is that something that cities can push the transit companies to adopt, or is that something that would be curious?
It's a great question, and I appreciate Mrs. Herrera bringing that up. So bus rapid transit is a concept as it was described by the speaker, where there is a dedicated lane of travel. It is intended to speed up connectability. Most transit agencies are either planning these or have implemented them. So I've talked with Sunline Transit. They're very interested in it because if you know, based on the route restructuring that they've done, to get from Indio to Palm Springs can sometimes take over 2 hours. The benefit of bus rapid transit or BRT is that you can actually dedicate a lane of travel, but it requires uniformity, right? You can't just do it in Indio. You have to do it throughout the valley. But they've estimated that with a dedicated lane of travel, assuming that all cities participate, you could go from Indio to Palm Springs in approximately 40 minutes or less. And that is and it might be quicker, but they're being conservative. So yes, it is something that cities can definitely work with because we control that right-of-way space. And the operator of that is Sunline Transit Agency. The other factor in that is they also do specialized loading areas. So they actually design into, and this is mostly for ADA accessibility or American Disabilities Act accessibility. So it is a concept that's utilized all over. It is a concept that our transit agency is looking at. There is actually federal funding for this because I was pointing out light rail, which is a concept that is it's a fixed route system, usually works best in more dense areas where they can gain the ridership. But in more areas like we live in that are less dense and are more spread out, BRT is an excellent alternative. So it is something that Sunline's looking at. We actually, the various directors in the Valley get together quarterly and talk about various things. And this is one of the recent topics we talked about. And Sunline has started an internal planning process to see if they could facilitate that as an agency. And then we'll see where that goes from that.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Next comment we have is Brent McManigal.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. Brent McManigal. Nice to see you again tonight. Here, on behalf of the Palmera project and the intersections of Requa and Rubidoux, as I mentioned last time, we've gone through the specific plan. We do have a project pending with staff and look forward to moving that forward in concert with the specific plan. One of our team members with the Urbanist Group submitted a letter earlier today. I just want to capture the three kind of questions that we have. We believe our project does comply with the plan and will be a catalyst for bringing additional new development into the city. And we're happy to hear from Director Snyder that the plan has flexibility in it because there's not everything that we can comply with. A couple of the areas is the block sizes. We agree with carving up and creating blocks, but in some areas and some parcels don't lend themselves to that. So wanted to ensure that there's flexibility on that rather than some of the standards that are in there. The other one is connectivity. Quite a bit of pedestrian access. We want to bring pedestrians in, have better connectivity from our project into Highway 111 and onto rapid transit. But in today's marketplace, there is a drive for security and safety and gated communities. So wanted to make sure that the plan doesn't preclude what's necessary in today's market, that the homeowners and renters are asking for, but making sure that we provide ample connectivity, not just for a driveway, but mid-block access into the projects. So it's easy for the citizens and the residents to come and go, for kids to come and go, and to be inviting places and not just stark walls, items like that. The last piece is the density. And there's discussion in the specific plan about transitions and making sure that the new development corresponds and is harmonious with the existing development adjacent to it. So if you have single family homes, single story on one side, that as the new development comes in, it mirrors that and then comes up with a higher density as you get towards the Highway 111 corridor. And that's what we're proposing. We want to make sure that the densities in the specific plan have flexibility. We believe the plan does, because it doesn't talk that much about flexibility. Director Snyder and I talked about that after the workshop. But again, wanting to make sure that there is flexibility in the densities as you move from Highway 111 towards the boundaries of that into single family homes. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Chair,
Questions, or would you like to?
if you would like me to respond, or I can wait.
Yeah,
for the
please
commission.
respond.
Okay. All great questions, first of all. So block size. You're sitting in the only true downtown in the Valley. And I know other cities, I'm probably going to get pummeled for that from my fellow directors, but it is true. We have a grid system with small walkable blocks. That's what makes downtown Indio so unique. And as a downtown renaissance and revitalization happens, that's what's going to make it successful. Having smaller walkable blocks is a goal of the specific plan for the reasons I just stated. It promotes pedestrian activity. It promotes pedestrian connectivity. But as I said, and I'll say it again, one size does not fit all. So we recognize that the plan is aspirational, but it's also realistic. And in those instances where, for whatever valid reason, it does not make sense to have the smaller walkable blocks, we will work with the applicants and we will work with you to come up with a reasonable alternative. And there is flexibility in the plan to allow us to do that. But the plan will push for those smaller walkable blocks because that is what makes a community better, bluntly. And that's why you sit in the best downtown setting in the Valley, because many years ago, when the city was being founded, the forefathers of the city had the foresight to identify small walkable blocks on a grid system. And that is what, in a way, you as the current forefathers or part of that group of forefathers are going to potentially do with this plan. You're going to create a new paradigm of how development will occur, but nobody expects it to always be the same. And so we do recognize the applicants or potential applicants' concern. As was referenced, there is a project that is waiting on the potential adoption of this plan that will come before you and would be looked at under this specific plan. So that's the block size. Connectivity. Nothing in the plan says you can't have gated communities. This general plan doesn't say you can't have gated communities. What the general plan does say is you have to have pedestrian connectivity when you do. So you can't just have walls that go on for thousands of feet without some pedestrian gate penetration. And that's what we would expect in this situation. We're not saying that you can't have them. What we're saying is make sure, for purposes of connectivity, that when you're doing your planning, you are creating those pedestrian connections. And then the last point is about density. So this is a fun one, because if you remember the downtown specific plan, we don't address density in that either, because it's a form-based code. So what we rely upon is the general plan. And what this specific plan relies upon is the general plan based on the general plan designation. So Midtown, for example, where this project is located, is 40 dwelling units to the acre. What a form-based code does is, rather than looking at the traditional factors of density, which is a common and been used for almost 100 years now as a common way of looking at land development. We're looking at the built environment first. We're looking at the relationship of the site and the building to other properties and to the street. And based on that approach, the density will be determined through the design, which is a different way of looking at it. Normally, you figure out your density and then you design. We're flipping it. We're saying design, and the outcome for that will be your density. Form-based code is more of a detailed approach at site design than traditional models of planning. Form-based code gives you as a decision-making body the opportunity to really focus on those things that do matter in site planning: connections, high quality materials, overall design, connectability. So density as envisioned for this project, and I've told the applicants already, they will have a density that is acceptable, but it's going to be acceptable based on you as the decision-making body's analysis of the design first. So I hope that makes sense in terms of answering the questions. But so the project that will potentially come before you will be evaluated as I just described, but there is flexibility. And a real tenet throughout this planning process has been to honor the general plan to the best of our ability, but not be so restrictive that we forestall the economic development opportunities of the city and the private property rights of individuals. So we're doing this balancing act, if you will. And that's the balancing act that if this plan gets adopted, you'll get to engage with staff and it'll be interesting and we'll see what happens. But I think it will be another lens for this commission, like you have with the downtown specific plan, to look at Indio a little bit differently.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do we have any other requests to speak on this matter online or?
No, there are none online. However, written comments were received and distributed to commissioners and posted on the City of Indio's website and meeting agenda portal.
Okay, and some came in rather recently, right? Right before?
Yes,
And
those
are
were
posted.
emailed.
Those are all posted online or will be?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay, then we will close the public hearing. And do we have any commissioner deliberation or comments? Okay. All right, we'll close the.
I'd like to. I just want to say that that this is a very promising, and I think a promising plan, and that I think that it really speaks to some of the priorities that the community has been communicating around making a city that is more friendly to its residents. And really, I think that there is a lot of opportunity both for those that are driving the economic forces and also the community that is interested in experiencing walkability, connectivity, and a more city that is designed to the human scale. And so I just want to say thank you to Kevin and his entire team and the consultant. Reading through that plan has been very, very exciting. So that's all the comments I just want to say.
Yeah, actually, we've been at this for a little while, right? With the general plan, the downtown specific. So after a while, you start kind of feeling the same comments and the same ideas. And I really love the fact that this is just another part of what we've been working on for so long. And even though I know people think, wow, this is, very different, this is going to take a long time. But, if you don't have a vision, you're never going to get there. And I think this is going to be a great addition to the community. It's going to differentiate what Highway 111 looks like here versus La Quinta versus some of the other cities. I also think that our residents that live in these areas have been waiting a long time for some quality development. And I really hope that this is going to start to spur some of that, especially around our downtown area as well, and have that all connect. So honestly, I think this is great. As a longtime resident here and born and raised, in the Coachella Valley, I am very excited to see what this is going to bring. And I look forward to working on all those little nuances that are going to come before us so that we can make this not only a plan, but something that we can start to see in our community. But I know it's been a long project. And yes, Kevin, you've had a lot of stuff going on in your staff and within the city. So thank you for getting this through. Thank you to everyone that worked on it. And I am looking forward to seeing this become part of our city. Thank you.
I'd also just thank you because this has been a long time in the works and it's easy for us to kind of forget some of the things that we've been working on over the last few years, and you've summarized it well and kind of reminded everyone of the intent and what we've been working so hard at. I go back to think like about the MUSP 300. I mean, I remember when I lived in that direct area nearly 20 years ago, hearing of things that were coming to that area that, even things were fenced off and graded and nothing ever happened. So hopefully that this is less restrictive and we can see some development of those areas where there's obviously a lot of potential to kind of bring that part of Indio closer to the western side, where we connect to La Quinta. That being said, thank you. Do we have?
Chair, I think Commissioner Fajardo may have wanted to say something.
No, just wanted to say and concur with my colleagues up here that I'm very impressed by the thoroughness of the plan. And, certainly I'm one to have a vision and certainly understand the importance of having a vision. But behind that vision, it does take multiple stakeholders to develop a plan, to continuously monitor that plan, and more importantly, to ensure that obviously we are doing our part to ensure that we champion as ambassadors of the city, the opportunities to continue to develop our city as such. I love the idea of connecting the 111 corridor beyond the city of Indio and the opportunities that presents as well, not only to the residents of our community, but our neighbors. And I think that's a fantastic opportunity as we continue to work together to ensure that we bring life to this plan. So I, for one, look forward to it. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. I'd like to make a motion recommending to the City Council the adoption of the Highway 111 Corridor Specific Plan and the repeal of the Central Highway 111 Corridor Specific Plan and the Mixed Use Specific Plan 300 MUSP-300, which is resolution number 2034.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairperson Isiano,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Rodriguez Saha,
Yes.
Commissioner Franz,
Absolutely, yes.
and Commissioner Fajardo.
100% yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, staff. Thank you, commissioners. Next item we have is 5.3, Resolution 2035, recommending approval to City Council of Development Agreement between City of Indio and HCL Indio Land Development LLC, and finding said adoption is exempt from further environmental review pursuant to provisions of CEQA.
Chair, at this time, it's my honor to introduce Carl Morgan, Economic Development Director. Carl and I work on just about everything together. And Carl is going to walk you through the presentation this evening and provide information and answer your questions. And certainly myself and or the consultants as needed will be here to support Mr. Morgan. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you this evening. As you recall, we had a study session last week and talked a little bit about this and the specific plan in a lot of detail. What we're bringing forward to you today is really kind of the culmination of what you saw happen a couple of years ago when Mr. Hagan purchased the Indio Fashion Mall, currently renamed as the Indio Grand Marketplace. There's an image there of essentially the drawings that you saw back in 2021 that were presented to you and the Planning Commission and the Council at that time. So the Planning Commission and City Council reviewed this in a joint study session. Those renovations of the existing mall at Monroe and Highway 111 that's contained within the Highway 111 specific plan are rolling forward fall of this year. So they'll start renovating and re-tenanting the existing shopping center. The City Council approved on July 20th a disposition and development agreement. That document allows the city to sell about 15.35 acres of 19.4 acres that the city owns south of that, north of John Noble's, west of Monroe. And that DDA is really the conveyance document. It gives the city the ability to convey that document. It's tied to the specific plan getting adopted and by the city council. Thank you for your recommendation to the council in that regard. And then it's also tied to the development agreement. So it all kind of wraps together. The DDA contains a schedule of performance and scope of development for a phased development of that southerly parcel. There's a few key things that are contained in the development agreement. We have to convey this property and close escrow on it by December 24th of this year. And that is actually a date certain that is in the agreement. The subject property, and so you can see on the west of this image is Monroe, the north is Highway 111, south is John Nobles, and then Rubidoux on the east. What I've done is I've kind of demarcated and highlighted the 5 parcels, and forgive me, but we're going through a parcel map creation for the conveyance of this property. It had 58 plus APNs spread across it and a lot of underlying deeds and so forth that have to be cleaned up in order to create saleable parcels. So what I've done is I've highlighted the 5 parcels of the city property that we would be conveying as a part of the DDA and that are subject to the development agreement. The not a part, a kind of T-shaped property is really the city-owned property. It's going to be a park and community gathering space as a part of this entire package. So a second action is required and a second agreement is needed in the form of a development agreement to really effectuate conditions of project approval and to require certain conditions that the developer is required to do with respect to building construction of offsite improvements to the 3 streets around. There's a traffic signal. There's some other things that they have to do, but primarily the work is the offsites and cleaning all of that up and making it nice and presentable and functional for the project, for the connectivity of the neighborhoods, connectivity between the projects. And then there'll be a 3.69 acre site, and that's what that T-shaped property is. Please don't hold me to the exact 0.69 because as the parcel map develops and we have to get that done in the next couple of months, that number may shrink a little bit or get a little bit larger, but essentially it's a 3.69 acre park. And that's to come forward, and they're working with the neighborhood and come forward with that. The Planning Commission previously reviewed this development agreement that you have in front of you. This is the parcel map. This is a draft that Michael Baker International has created. So again, this shows and highlights the 5 parcels that would be conveyed and then shows the proposed park. The highlight that's up in the northeast corner adjacent to and contiguous to the proposed park and community gathering space, that is a lot line adjustment cleanup because that little parcel that juts into, it's about 1.38 acres, it actually has to be squared up to be able to accommodate the parcel. So the developer and the city will collaborate to create a lot line adjustment to square that up and make that work. That parcel is currently owned by the developer, and the gray shaded area is the city-owned piece of real estate. So we just need to clean that up a little bit because the park is in the middle and goes down, and then there's some portion of parking on each side of that T on the northerly part. So the recommendation this evening to the Planning Commission is to adopt resolution number 2035, recommending approval to the City Council of the development agreement between the City of Indio, HCL Indio Land Development LLC, and finding that the said adoption is exempt from further environmental review pursuant to the provisions of Section 15004 of the California Environmental Quality Act CEQA guidelines. And with that, that concludes my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just a note, maybe for the record, that staff special meeting was August 11th, correct?
That is correct. We actually held a special meeting on August 11th.
Okay.
So that is correct, Chair.
Okay, I believe the report said the 18th. I just
Yeah,
wanted
my
to-
apologies. That's my
Apologies.
fault. Yeah,
Okay.
that's my fault. I missed the date when I put that in. It's not Mr. Snyder's.
I just
take
wanted to
full-
make sure.
I take full responsibility for it. I lose weeks. We are so busy here, as you well know. Weeks just bleed into one another, and I sometimes have trouble keeping track of all those dates.
Honestly, it could have been either of us.
I had a quick question regarding, if I may, sir, and thank you for the presentation. In relationship to the input from some of the local residents, you mentioned they had some input for that park, or they will have opportunities to provide input for the overall design.
That's correct. You know, pre-COVID, we started some of that dialogue and conversations, and then we went through the COVID thing. And I don't know if we're in it or out of it. I can't even keep track anymore. I just am happy that every day I'm vertical, and I'm not seeing as many people dying around us as we were. But yeah, they will have input into that. That's the plan. We have some work to do. I mean, this isn't going to happen overnight, just like the specific plan isn't going to be implemented overnight. But the specific plan really is setting the blueprint for not only this to roll forward, but also all of the other things that you've talked about in your meetings with respect to creating that framework for future development. I have to commend Mr. Snyder and his staff and the team. They've done a great job with respect to having an economist look at this. And one of the problems with the former specific plan from an economic development perspective is that it didn't pencil financially because the densities weren't high enough to really make it pencil for the kinds of development density that you would need in order to be able to afford to do a project that would give you a return on an investment. And I can say that the densities that are in your general plan that are carried forward into the specific plan and now along that corridor, it's really going to create that opportunity. And there's been a lot of development interest in our community, as you well know, and even more so now focusing on Highway 111 because they're anticipating that this specific plan becomes the legal framework and the document for that highway. And they will then start bringing those projects forward. And Mr. Snyder and you, the Planning Commission and City Council, are going to get even more busy as that rolls forward. But I digress. Thank you very much for everything that you do. As I said at the 11th meeting, not the 18th. And thank you.
Is that true, Kevin? We're going to be more busy. Are you ready for that?
Actually, Mr. Morgan is just whetting your appetite. Yeah, the short answer is yes. And if you want to blame me now, you can.
Thank you very much, Carl. Any other questions for staff? Vice Chair? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and open public hearing. We have, I know of one comment to speak. Clarice Thomas, please. Ma'am, please. Thank you. If you'll please state your name for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
To the official staff of the city council meeting. My name is Clarice Thomas. And my concern is I only have one question because I'm concerned about the neighborhood south of John Noble. I think it's south of John Noble Street. In this plan that you're planning for the development, does this include that the community people will lose their homes again? I saw the map, but I don't have my map with me. I noticed that I remember there was Daisy Street, Primrose, Esther Court, but I forgot my map. So I'm concerned about the neighborhood people, the families, because I'm remembering the families that lost their homes and things and grieved over losing their homes. And that's other side of John Noble on the south side, I think. So I'm concerned about the neighborhood of all those people that there, would they be in danger of losing their homes because of the new development in Indio?
The answer is
Thank you for your question.
no. The site that the proposed expansion is north of John Noble's. It doesn't include the south of John Noble's. So the property that we're conveying has no development on it.
Can you make sure you're speaking to the microphone so
Oh,
we
I'm
can pick you
sorry.
up?
So no, it does not include the John Nobles neighborhood to the south. The parcel, the development parcel is north of John Nobles, west of Monroe. East of Monroe, west of Rubidoux, and south of Highway 111. So it's that area. It does not include that neighborhood to the south.
Going by the map, the street was on the map that was sent out.
It might be helpful also to talk about some of the anti-displacement strategies that are proposed in the plan that are included in the site, because I think that is part of the larger concern, is that this particular item that we're talking about is not affecting the community, and is not, but it will, once development happens, have an impact on the surrounding communities. And so, Kevin, it might be useful for the community to learn about some of those strategies that we've put in place with the plan.
So, Chair, if you would like, I can wait till you received all comments and then respond to them at that time, if you would like.
Certainly,
Okay.
certainly. We have another request to speak from Mr. Al Mesa. Mr. Mesa, thank you.
Kevin, let me ask you a question. And the development for the property, that we got housing, or what is going to be the development? Only commercial?
Yes.
Okay. So as presented to the City Council, roughly November 2020, I believe, if I remember, my memory serves me correctly, there is a mixed development proposal that will become ultimately before the Planning Commission. It will include approximately 300 multifamily apartments. It will include a hotel product. It will include several retail buildings and several inclusive of restaurant buildings. So there will be a housing component to it. And that is currently planned right around 300 multifamily units.
Okay, Kevin, let me ask you something. You know, I happen to be one of the owners of the property when they take us out of the Indio Fashion Mall. And when we go into the fight with the neighborhood, and we were fighting about it, the condition of the city of Indio, and when we go to court and we follow everything else, the condition was that the house was no housing was going to be, no family housing was going to be in that property at all. Because according to, you know, they displaced most of the people there. And that was one of the conditions the attorneys from this neighborhood there. So I was wondering, because, you know, the last owner, two owners behind the Indio Fashion Mall, he was going to put apartments in top of the Indio Fashion Mall when they were going to redone it. What was it, 14 years ago? And they reject his plan because of that. So I was wondering, did we ever taken the condition what happened 29 years ago? Or is just over the, just a question on it, because, you know, we have a big fight about that in that time, and we have a real big argument and real legal parts. And when we settle, part of the agreements, that maybe they're not even in the books anymore, but, you know, knowing the city is not in the books anymore. But, you know, I remember real well when we go to court and we put the thing together, right? Okay, so most of the people in that neighborhood already died. So I guess we are only 3 or 4 people left, seriously, out of the people who had that fight. So, you know, I just was wondering. And we still had the church. The city got the church already. We still have one church in there. One of the churches is still there. You know, it's just a question. I don't know. But I just wanted to find out about it because I didn't see the plan. I wasn't here when you guys put the plan together. So that was one of the things, one of the questions on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, go ahead and have staff address.
So I think I'm going to start with the prior comment. So the city's intent is to work with the residents of the area south of John Nobles Avenue. And we will be working, as Mr. Morgan pointed out, that effort had started prior to COVID pandemic. Obviously, we were limited in our outreach, but there is an intent to work with that community to make sure that that community gathering space in that park is supportive of that community and that they would help us in the design of that.
Okay. So what can members of that community expect going forward as far as opportunities that they'll have to be a part of those conversations?
Right. So there's been, at this time, we still have to go through the development agreement process that Mr. Morgan presented on. And assuming if City Council adopts that, that's kind of the first foundational step. And then following that, there'll be an effort to develop and engage, develop a plan to engage with the residents so that we get their feedback on the design of that public space. Mr. Morgan may have more detail, but I would anticipate that that will likely happen over, the next year or so. The park component will be developed as the overall plan is developed for the entirety. I have to apologize. I don't know. I wasn't here 15, 20, 30 years ago, so I can only speak to the present. So this particular plan and the development agreement that's before you, and I want to make it clear for the record, we're talking about resolution number 2035, the development agreement, but obviously the specific plan has come up and there is a relationship. So I'll be happy to respond on some of the questions and also the vice chairperson's request. But the development of this particular area, again, has to be consistent with the general plan and has to be consistent with the specific plan if adopted by the City Council. It does support the idea of having housing. In this instance, as seen by some of the members of the Planning Commission and City Council several years ago, that concept was multifamily housing. And that is still the concept as we understand it, approximately 300 housing units. Now, the city has, just as you're well aware, because you worked on it, the city has a certified housing element. We have planned for 7,812 housing units, new housing units in our city between 2021 and 2029. So every little bit counts. We have a very limited supply of multifamily housing in our city. That is a problem for us because we do not have enough diverse housing product. And that means that the cost of housing in Indio is higher than other areas in the valley that have more supply than we do. So having more multifamily housing in our city is good, in my opinion. As we discussed, it will be high quality, it will be well designed, it will be context sensitive. And I mean by that we will work to make sure that whatever is developed is positive towards the properties around it, including the neighborhood to the south. And those neighbors will have the opportunity to participate in that because it's a public process. They will have the opportunity to participate with staff. They will have the opportunity to participate with the Planning Commission. And we invite that participation. We want that participation. So on that regard, I believe, again, I can't speak to the past because I was not here, but the plan as envisioned and as you've seen would have to be consistent. And I think it is, for all intents and purposes, it is consistent. I mean, they haven't gone through the formal review process, but I think as we go through it with them and based on the concepts they presented today and the visions they have for that, it's a total of 19 acres, inclusive of the park. So that roughly 19 acres, 19.05 acres is the actual acreage, would be developed under the provisions of the specific plan and would be reviewed in a public arena with this Planning Commission and as needed City Council. Finally, the chair, vice chair, asked for a overview, if you will, of the anti-displacement portion of the specific plan. So the specific plan has a chapter that focuses on implementation, focuses on private development, public development, economic development, and anti-displacement. And what we're trying to do here is avoid that oftentimes when you put plans into place and the market starts responding to them, it can have an unintended consequence. And the unintended consequence is that it impacts those areas around, particularly with increases in property values that may make it more difficult for folks who own property there to stay there. So this plan has a number of strategies that we will seek to implement, assuming again that the plan is adopted, that will try to minimize and or avoid that. No plan is good if it leads to more negative outcomes than positive outcomes. And so the goal here is to balance the goals and aspirations of the specific plan, which again is consistent with the general plan, or has to be consistent with making sure that we work hard to make sure that the existing property owners, the existing residents, the existing businesses, we're not only talking about residences, we're also talking about businesses, are not negatively impacted by the success, if it does happen, of the plan. So we have a number of strategies. It's on page, well, in your packet, it starts on page 273 of 320, and on the plan, it starts on page 142. And just to give you an example, what we're talking about in terms of potential strategies, there may be instances where developers come in and they want something special from the city. And you, as a commission, developed an approach that we want to bring forward into this plan. And it was for the downtown specific plan. You developed the idea of community benefits. And the idea is, if you want something, you got to give something. So if a developer comes forward and makes a unique ask of you that is perhaps, not something that the plan would normally seek, or maybe a stretch, so to speak, still allowed, but would be unusual, then there is an agreement process whereby they could possibly get consideration for that in terms of giving something back. And that giving something back would be making sure, for example, that when they are doing improvements, that perhaps they do improvements beyond the boundaries of their project. So for example, if there's a neighborhood to the south that has no sidewalks or substandard sidewalks or substandard roadways, we could have an agreement where they would extend and improve beyond the boundaries of their project, because legally we can't ask them to do beyond the boundaries of their project, but they can volunteer to do it. So that's an example. Another is the city would look at the potential of density bonuses. So this is a concept that maybe you've heard about, maybe you haven't, but the idea is sometimes you move density around with the idea of minimizing impact. In some parts of the US, when I worked up in Washington State, we had a lot of wetlands and we didn't want to impact the wetlands. So we would take the density that could have been on that property that we didn't want on that property because it would destroy the wetlands, and we would move it over to another property. Same premise. So to minimize impacts to surrounding areas, we might want to reallocate that density that could be close and impactful to somewhere else, perhaps somewhere else on the property, perhaps somewhere else in the corridor. And then we will develop a monitoring program. And this is actually something that I'm excited about, because the city would develop a program where we would monitor the risks of displacement. And this will be a new thing for us. We haven't done this before, but the benefit of it is that we will have more real-time awareness of what the actions of the plan are doing. And we will have the opportunity to address those versus waiting to the end when it's already happened. So what does that look like? I'll let you know, because we've never done it before, but we have a premise and we have an idea. And this will be something that, as again, if the plan is adopted, we'll come back and work with the Planning Commission, because I think I would definitely want your input and your ideas on this, because you are representatives of the community. And I think you would have some really great input into that. So that's another example. The point in all of this is, when this project, this plan goes forward and when projects happen, we don't want to do it in a vacuum. We want to be cognizant of how this is impacting the rest of the community. And we want to make sure that we are doing what we can and what we should to mitigate that. And so that's why we've developed this. The downtown plan didn't have a mitigation strategy or an anti-displacement. And that may be something we want to revisit, in all honesty. But this plan does propose that. And I think it's a good idea. And it's, to give you another example, we're going after a very large state grant. We have state folks coming to visit us tomorrow. And we are going to be talking about how, if we get this humongous state grant and we do all these improvements to a particular area of our city, how we're going to make sure that we don't have anti-displacement there. Because when you improve an area, sometimes property values go up and sometimes it gets harder to live there. So this idea of anti-displacement is, I think, becoming more of a theme in our city, and should be more of kind of a focal point in our planning documents. And so here's an example of how we're proposing to do it.
Okay, thank you everyone for the comments. We'll close the public hearing and go to any commissioner comments or deliberation.
I just wanted to share that, some of the concerns that were raised by the public comments tonight were some of the same concerns that I was having throughout, even when this first vision was presented to the Planning Commission about, I want to say a year ago, maybe a little more. And so, one of the things that I was consistently coming back to was those anti-displacement measures and strategies that are being proposed within the plan. So for me, I even reached out to Kevin to say, okay, what are the properties within the that are owned by the city that fall within the corridor? How many times, will we be using a property that is owned by the city and handing it over to developers to, do this and to contribute to the housing needs that we have in the city? And so, I want to thank all the folks that came out and gave us their public comments, and just to share that, one of the ways that I was able to reconcile that was, again, looking at the corridor plan and really seeing the value of this anti-displacement strategy, and really looking forward to continue working with the city to make sure that this is something that that we're keeping mindful of, and that, all of this development should be in benefit and to enhance the lives of the residents surrounding it. And so I'm very much looking forward to being able to continue working and have that, in mind. And so I just want to say to the folks that were commenting about, their concern that that this is a concern that I think is shared widely by many folks, including myself. And so I will be paying very close attention. So thank you.
Apologize. The vice chairperson reminded me of something I should have reported in my staff report. The vice chair did reach out and ask what properties the city owned in the corridor. In addition to the 19.05 acres that is being discussed tonight, at least a portion of it for the development agreement, the city owns two other properties. One is the property that's immediately east of Indio High School and north of Mechanics Bank and Dutch Brothers. If you're familiar with that area, it's where everyone, I call it the overflow parking area. So that is property that the city owns, and that had no particular.
Is that the property where the former Ralph's had burned
Yes,
down?
thank you. The former Ralph's. I always forget that reference. Thank you. So that property is owned by the city, and no particular use at this time has been identified for it. The other piece of property that we own is approximately 2 acres that is south of Highway 111, and it is directly across from Mathis Brothers. And it was a property the city received as part of a settlement with a developer back in the early 2000s. The council on July 20th actually authorized an exclusive negotiating agreement with a affordable housing developer who owns the adjacent property and is potentially seeking to acquire that land from the city to develop an affordable housing project that would introduce approximately 250 housing units along the corridor for affordable housing. So those are the other properties that that the vice chairperson was referring to. Those are the properties in addition to the one being discussed now that the vice chair was referring to. And I should have reported that because he did ask me that, and I should have made the rest of the commission aware of that. So my apologies.
Thank you. Echoing Vice Chair's comments in regards to the anti-displacement and everything, and going back to the public comments in regards to a previous agreement, was there, maybe we can research, I know you said you weren't here, but was there any agreements made to not be putting housing in any of those properties north of John Noble's that were affected previously?
Chair, not that I'm aware of. I've never heard that before. So I'm not saying that the commenter is wrong. I'm not aware.
Okay.
We will, based on that comment, we will check our records.
Okay. Thank you. I know that, we've had members of the surrounding community very vocal and definitely have concerns over, the future development of this area, and they want to kind of protect their neighborhood. If anything, I think, as you can clearly see, we're trying to enhance, neighborhood. I think it'll be a big benefit to those properties, to the south of the project.
And Chair, I would say that, as current staff, certainly Mr. Morgan and myself, we're aware of those. We obviously, Mr. Morgan's been here a few more years than me, but we are aware of those concerns. We're aware of the need to engage with residents, and certainly as staff, that is something that we plan to do with other city staff and other representatives of the city.
Great. I'm sure the surrounding community is looking forward to hearing more and being a part of that discussion moving forward. Any other commissioner comments? Gloria, Gabriel?
Sure. I just want to, again, acknowledge the residents that came in to speak today. I can totally understand Ms. Thomason's concerns about the neighborhood. I was a little young when that all went down, but I do remember just a little bit. And that was very tough for our community to see. But I do hope that this development will actually improve the neighborhood and bring some much needed housing that we really do need within our community. So, being on the Planning Commission, it really is an honor. And we will definitely be working to make sure that that development is a benefit to the John Nobles community. And, we can't fix what was done, but we can hopefully make this area a much more vibrant part of our community and something that will help the residents that live there now and the new residents that may live there in the future. So we do acknowledge what happened and hope that we can do it much better this time. And hopefully we'd love to have you be involved when the community, comments are open and, invite your neighbors. This is your opportunity to say and understand what could possibly be in the near future. And again, we thank you for that. But overall, I think that this development has been coming for a long, long time. I mean, my daughter is now 21, and every time we drive by there, she says, are they going to do something? And it's a constant conversation. So I'm hoping that this is the time when in a few months or a year, I can drive her by and say, look, something's happening, and that'll be really good for the whole community. So again, thank you to staff. This has been a long time coming. I know you guys have been working on this for a really long time. And, again, we hope that this is going to be a huge improvement to a very important part of our city. So thank you to everyone that has been involved in this. And I'm looking forward to keeping it moving forward.
Thank you.
Just want to say and echo that same sentiment. Thank you very much. It's certainly progress. It's been intelligently planned. Appreciate that.
All right.
Okay, no more comments. I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
We would like to recommend, we're recommending approval to the City Council of the development agreement between the City of Indio and HCL Indio Land Development LLC, and finding said adoption is exempt from the further environmental review pursuant to the provisions of Section 15004 of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA guidelines, resolution number 2035.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Chairperson Luciano,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Saha,
Yes.
Commissioner Franz,
Yes.
Commissioner Fajardo,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay.
And Chair, if I can just note for the benefit of the public as well as the commission that these items are currently scheduled to be considered by the City Council at its September 21st, 2022 regular meeting. We will do all appropriate public noticing and just wanted to make sure that that was on the record.
Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. Any other commissioner comments or any staff items you'd like to address?
The only thing I would note is that we have a new planner starting this Friday. Her name's Kendra Reef. She's actually from Indio. She's returning home. And we're excited to have her join. You'll get introduced to her at the next Planning Commission meeting. But I'm very excited to have her join. We're as was noted, we are very busy. So her addition to the team is going to make a difference, and she's got a lot of experience. And so I look forward to introducing her to the commission and having her work with you.
Thank you. Okay. With that being said, we'll adjourn to. Yes, Vice Chair.
I just wanted to share some news with you all that just very recently I was appointed to be on the California APA Inland Empire Board to be the Planning Commissioner liaison, and we'll be working with the Coachella Valley region to bring in more resources to planning commissioners. And so I just wanted to share those good news and to share with you all and the community about our responsibility to the community and trying to bring in more resources. So just wanted to share those good news with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Congratulations. Okay. Kevin, next scheduled meeting will be September
14th.
14th. Okay, we will adjourn to next scheduled meeting of September 14th.